Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. This week, Assetto Corsa have released the second edition of their Porsche Pack DLCs, the second of 3 versions of that we're going to be getting over the next month. This has brought a whole bunch of brand new, wonderful Porsche road and race cars to the sim, all of which are very welcome additions. This, however, that you see before you, this is the most anticipated release that I have seen for Assetto Corsa in recent memory, and it is, in all of its glory, the Porsche 919 Hybrid LMP1. As its name suggests, this car, developed by Porsche for the specific purpose of competing in the World Endurance Championship, the car made its debut in the 2014 season, and in its 2015 spec, it underwent probably its most radical evolution to date. Some sources that I've read have said that this car contains upwards of 80% brand new parts relative to its 2014 version. So for 2015, Porsche very much brought a new car to the championship, and certainly their investment has paid off. First off, to go into the specs. The specs on this thing, as you could imagine, because it is a very, very high-tech racing car that's currently competing in a World Championship absolutely elite series, the specs are very highly guarded. So the specs that Porsche have released are intentionally a little bit vague, but they are as follows, and they're all very interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. It is, of course, a Le Mans prototype class LMP1. It is a carbon fiber monocoque, aluminum, aramid composites, things like that going into the chassis construction as well, but it's a carbon fiber monocoque just like you'd see in a Formula 1 car. The overall measurements on it, it is 1,050 millimeters high, it is 1,900 millimeters wide, and it is 4,650 millimeters long, so our length is just a little bit over 4.5 meters in total. Very compact size. Of course, it is an elite racing car. They don't need to be any bigger than the space that is required to house all of the mechanical components, plus a human being who's crazy enough to strap himself into it. That's what we're talking about here. In terms of the mechanicals underneath, we have a very interesting choice of engine for this car, and I think I know why they did this, but the engine is a petrol-powered V4. Yes, a V4. I'm not talking about an inline 4 that we see in most 4-cylinder configurations. This is a V4, so 4 cylinders arranged in banks of 2, horizontally opposed to each other, in a V configuration. I believe it's a 90-degree bank angle on that engine. A V4 is a very interesting choice for an engine design. They're not very widely seen in road cars because they're just odd. In road cars, you have packaging issues, you have maintenance issues. Obviously, those of you who drive a road car with an engine that has a V bank angle, you'll know that getting to things like spark plugs, injectors, and whatnot, depending on how your engine is packaged, it's very difficult sometimes to work with those angles and do any maintenance. Same issue here with the V4, that's why it's not used very widely in road cars. You do see V4 cylinders in motorbikes, that sort of application where you do have more access in general to your engine because you have removable fairings and things, but in terms of practical automotive applications, you don't see V4s very much. However, you do see a V4 in this. I think it has to do with center of gravity because you can have your crankshaft mounted low, and you can have symmetrical, shall we say, quasi-centers of gravity on either side of the crankshaft due to your 2 banks of 2 cylinders each, obviously being directly opposed to each other along the latitudinal axis. But anyway, enough science. That V4 engine is turbocharged, and I can't get a specific power output figure on it because, of course, this is an active race car, but it displaces 2 liters, and according to Porsche, it's producing by itself less than 500 horsepower. I don't know what that figure actually is, and Porsche certainly are not about to tell me, but about 500 horsepower from the internal combustion 4-cylinder engine. Of course, this is 2015, and we have hybrid technology. Hybrid technology is certainly the new space race when it comes to automotive design. We first saw it in Formula 1 crop up in 2009 with the KERS system, and obviously now Formula 1 has ERS, which is a refined system of that. Of course, Formula 1 turbocharged as well. That technology has migrated its way into the World Endurance Championship, and now we are seeing it exploited tremendously in that series. We also have electric motors on this car, which are powered by lithium-ion battery packs as well as a motor generator unit, an MGU-H, run off of the turbocharger from that four-cylinder engine. The electric motors are mounted to the front axle, and they produce over 400 horsepower according to the Porsche spec sheet. So you have about 500 horsepower, give or take, from the internal combustion engine. You have 400 horsepower being produced, of course, to any degree that a driver wants by the electric motors on the front end. So 5 plus 4 is 9, we all know. So, because we can't get a solid, significant power output figure combined for the electric motors and the internal combustion engine, I would say that we could be pushing 1,000 horsepower from this car. Porsche rates it conservatively at 900. If they're willing to tell the general public it's putting out 900, you better believe it's more than that. So I'm saying 1,000 horsepower at least combined total power output in this car. That gives us, according to Porsche, a 0 to 60 mile per hour acceleration time of 2.2 seconds, a 0 to 120 mile per hour acceleration time of 4.8 seconds. When you put that together with the fact that this car does not weigh a lot, in fact the minimum weight in the WEC is 875 kilograms. Of course the car is going to be designed to be lighter than that. They'll ballast it out with fuel and driver and those magnesium blocks that we all know about to 875 kilograms. You realize that you're dealing with a tremendous power to weight ratio, and you're dealing with a car that's got a tremendous performance envelope. When you couple that with the obviously very advanced aerodynamics going on here, I mean, look at that front end. It looks blunt. It does not look like something that should go fast. I mean, it looks like a rock from this angle, but have a look at what they're doing to the air on that front end. Got that front splitter there, which may as well be a front wing, because just look at how it's shaped. Those wonderful open curves and things that you see in it. This is clearly designed in many wind tunnels, many CAD programs. Many very smart people have worked on this car, and you can see what they're doing to the air the moment it runs into the thing. Got a big grill in the middle, which I'm assuming is routing air partially to the cockpit, partially to the front brakes, partially to those electric motors in front, and then you see where it starts to go. Turning vanes along the front end here underneath the headlights to work that air around the front wheels. And then we have a very Formula One-esque design as we go down the side of the car heading toward the rear. You have these quasi-barge boards which are sculpting that airflow to squirt it around the rear tires so that we don't get too much drag or turbulence. And then, of course, massive rear wing on this thing, adjustable any way you like. Massive diffuser on this thing, flat bottom on this thing, unlike in Formula One. You don't have that stepped plane design going on, limiting you. These big strakes coming off of the rear wheels, of course, controlling the high pressure zones that can occur inside the wheel wells, the wheel arches there, and cause lift. So that's to bleed that air out. Of course, a very smooth profile of the topside bodywork to funnel that air across to the rear wing. And those exhausts there from your four-cylinder engine. Twin exhaust, because we've got two banks of cylinders here, and the turbos, I would say there are probably two turbochargers on this car, so no single exhaust like we have from the V6s in Formula One. Twin exhaust, like to see that. And of course, another feature that has migrated over from Formula One is this shark fin running from the backside of the cockpit all the way to the rear wing. We saw this in F1 starting in 2008, and a lot of teams carried it over through 2010, at which point it was banned because they didn't want bodywork joined to the rear wing. However, you still see this very much in the WEC, and here it is. It's just to control the side loads going onto the car around corners and, of course, with crosswinds. Personally, I never truly understood the application of that shark fin, but if a driver thinks it helps, if an engineer thinks it helps, put it on a car, because you will probably see a benefit. Whether or not it's technical or psychological, it doesn't matter. If the car's faster with it, put it on. Of course, going into the details here from Kunos, lots and lots of intricate, wonderful, splendid details for us. Just have a look at the catches here for the bodywork, quick releases, valves for charging the MGU system, the fuel valve, of course. The big fuel nozzle would go in there and dump fuel into the tank during a pit stop. And of course, we can open up the doors and have a look inside the cockpit. I have to pinch myself every once in a while, because when you see the performance potential of this car when we get it out on track, you forget that it has a roof and 2 doors. This thing is Formula 1 fast. Absolutely phenomenal. Big Brembo brakes, of course, carbon ceramic discs, big fat slick Michelin tires all around. Michelin, not the only supplier for Le Mans at very least, but very much a control tire setup for the LMP1 category at Le Mans and in the rest of the WEC. Just tremendous detail. I could stare at this car for hours. It's just got so much going on. Have a look at the detail there with the headlights. See the lens effects? All the screw heads behind the principal bulbs there, and you can see the contours of the carbon inside the headlight itself. Just brilliant modeling from Kunos. Going around to this side, you can see into the cockpit there. It's quite inviting, I must say. Also, yes, this car is a 2-door, but it's only got 1 seat. I suppose you could squeeze a second occupant in there very uncomfortably. That's a bit of regulation and a bit of tradition. I do remember years ago, I don't know if this is still the case, but cars at Le Mans needed to carry 2 people. Not in the sense that 2 people would be on board, but they needed to have the ability to carry 2 people, and they also, very strangely, needed to carry a toolkit on board. I do remember that from reading motorsport history books. So it's a nod to tradition in that case to have 2 doors on a car like this, but just unreal. If you could put a spaceship on 4 wheels, this would be it. Absolutely, this would be it. When I look at this car, I think space shuttle. I don't think racing. that's the technology we're talking about in this thing. And of course, when we get on track, you will see that. We can morph into the cockpit here. Get a sense of what we're looking at. Just brilliant stuff. Of course, all this stuff comes alive when you're out on track. The steering wheel tells you a tremendous amount of information about what's going on. Of course, you get shift lights across the top, and then you have fuel level, traction control settings, your lap time, your speed, your revs on the engine, and your meters for your MGU-K and MGU-H input and output, your state of charge on the battery, how much power you can use in a given lap. All of that stuff is displayed for you. Just absolutely wonderful. Of course, the modeling and texturing throughout is glorious. You can see all the switches and buttons you've got on the dash, your secondary functions, of course, all those things on the steering wheel. Your warning stickers for the KERS unit in there, and the weave of the carbon on the cockpit surround. This is obviously the driver's seat. This is analogous to the cockpit surround in a Formula 1 car, just to control where the driver's head goes in the event of a side impact. He doesn't hit anything hard. Very wonderful stuff. And also, you'll see this better when we get out on track, but you can see we close the doors in here, and your sight lines in the cockpit are very narrow. You have good visibility. I'm not going to say you don't, but you can see the height of those wheel arches, and you can also see the tremendous A-pillar, and just have a look at the depth in here. You're actually sitting quite a bit ways back from the windshield, so your depth perception in this car takes a little bit of getting used to, because there's a lot of car out in front of you, and you just have to get a sense of your proportions and your location on track relative to curbs and things like that, especially other cars for a race situation. You'll notice that you have the rear view mirrors on the fenders, which are kind of not useful while you're out on track, because at least with my field of view you can't really see them. But overhead, where you'd expect to see a traditional rear view mirror, keen-eyed viewers may have noticed that there is no rear window, so that's a camera system. There's a camera mounted on the roof, and that's projecting an image onto that screen, which functions as your rear view mirror. Absolutely fantastic stuff. So we can go outside of the car once again and just have one final look before we go out on track. Of course, we're going to go to Le Mans with this thing. There's no other place to go. Welcome to Le Mans. Of course, we had to come here because in 2015, this car is the 2015 version, this particular one, number 19, was the overall and LMP1 winner at the 2015 24 Hours of Le Mans. In the hands of Earl Bamber, Nick Tandy, and Nico Hülkenberg, this car took the LMP1 and overall win, having covered 395 laps. Incredible. Porsche's return to the WEC in the LMP1 category in 2014 came good in 2015. Absolutely incredible. They also took second and fifth positions. Finishing second in the hands of Timo Bernhard, Brendan Hartley, and Mark Webber. Number 17 finished second, having covered 394 laps, and finishing fifth in the hands of Mark Lieb, Romain Dumas, and Neil Jani, having covered 391 laps. The number 18 came home. So an incredible first, second, and fifth showing, of course, punctuated in the middle in third and fourth by the legendary Audis. Porsche had an absolutely sensational return to Le Mans and a sensational victory. Having covered that, we should go into a little bit about the technicalities of the setup. In terms of your tire choices, you've got soft, medium, and hard. Of course, in real life, there would be wet weather compounds as well. I believe they use an intermediate compound in the WEC as well as a full extreme wet, just like we see in Formula 1. Rather small fuel tank in this car, you'll see as we put fuel on board. Only holds 68 liters of fuel. That does not seem like a whole bunch, especially when you think about early 90s Formula 1 cars holding 150, 200 liters, so definitely some fuel efficiency going on here, and with a lap as long as it is at Le Mans, fuel efficiency is key. Your electronics, you've got traction control settings and your MGUK delivery settings. For your MGUK delivery, and we'll go into this when we're out on track, but you've got charging, which is no output basically, and all charging. Low preserve, low aggressive, high preserve, high aggressive, and hot lap, which is just full beans. Give me that full 1,000-ish horsepower. I don't care about efficiency. So you've got that. Traction control, you have a very, very, very wide and detailed array of settings for your traction control. You can turn it off, of course, and then you've got settings 1 all the way up through 12. So the lower the number, the more assist you get. So 1 is the most assist, and then 12 rather, it may as well be off. So you've got a lot of play in your traction control settings, and of course most of that is going to be down to tire wear and of course any wet weather conditions that the drivers may encounter. We'll leave it to start off at about 5, and we'll play with it as we're out on track. Not so much in the way of aero in terms of what you can directly play with. You've got your front spoiler, they're calling it. I'm calling it a wing, even though it is, yes, very much a spoiler or a splitter. And your rear wing settings, of course. You don't get to see these things change as you do in some other cars in AC. No stock Kunos cars have this ability yet, but yes, you can adjust your front and rear wing spoiler thing settings. Of course, you have all your suspension adjustments as you would expect. Your diff, your brake bias, your brake power, your dampers for heave, packers, travel ranges for your suspension front and rear, and of course the anti-roll bars, wheel rates, ride heights, and things like that. So to get us out on track, we're going to put a fair bit of fuel on board, and we're going to go play at Le Mans. This is what we see going on in the cockpit. Obviously the car is now very much alive as we're sitting here idling in the pits. You see the information on our steering wheel. You'll have shift lights that come across the top right above the screen. In the upper left you can see the current lap time ticking away. Next to that is your gear indicator. 7-speed semi-automatic paddle shift box, hydraulically actuated just like you see in Formula 1. Below that you see your fuel level, the 41 there, that's indicating in liters. Traction control settings on that center right hand screen, and the number of laps that you've completed next to that. Below that we have our speed. I'm measuring in miles per hour even though it's labeled in metric, and your engine RPM, which you can see will get up there a little bit. So clutch in, first gear, raise the revs a bit, and let's get out on track without stalling it, and we've managed that. Coming on to Mulsanne for the first time. straight line speed probably does not seem that impressive to you. We're pulling 182 miles per hour right now and still accelerating reasonably hard. It should be noted that we are currently in charge mode on the MGU, so I don't really have any MGU power going to that front axle at the moment. On the steering wheel, I want to point out the extreme right-hand side of the screen on the steering wheel. You see two bars. On the outermost right edge of that screen, you see a yellow-orange bar. That is telling you how much MGU power you have remaining on the current lap. Apparently there is some sort of power per lap limit in the WEC. I'm not entirely sure what it actually is, but there is a limit, and that tells you how much power you have used on a given lap. To the left of that, inboard, you have a blue bar, which right now is all the way up off scale high. That is the total state of charge of your MGU battery. So the yellow bar is your power that you're allowed to use over the course of a lap. The blue bar is the amount of power that the car actually has. Nice stroboscopic effect going through the trees here, mid-morning. A little bit difficult to see the braking point, actually. Also, some very interesting sounds that I want to point out to you as you're going along in this car. First of all, and probably most dramatically, you get a tremendous pop from the engine as you change up above a certain RPM. Absolutely love that noise. Obviously, what you're hearing is the fuel cutting. In order for the engine revs to match with the gearbox, shift times are pretty much instantaneous, just like in a modern Formula 1 gearbox. Of course, 7-speed unit, as you've seen. Also, you get some other very interesting sounds. In addition to the obvious engine noise, which is actually quite weird, I must say, considering it's a 4-cylinder. You got noises from the gearbox and under braking. Listen into the next braking zone. Coming up into the braking zone. Hear that squeal that starts at a very high pitch and then ramps down in its frequency as we slow down. What you're hearing there is the MGU regen on the front axle. It's harvesting energy under braking, just like the Kerr system in Formula 1. Harvesting energy under braking, turning those electric motors into generators, and then shoving that power as efficiently and as quickly as possible into the battery packs to be used later. A little bit of understeer on the front axle. Whenever you're off throttle in this car, there is regen happening. Because those motors are on the front axle, they're going to harvest off of the front axle. So you can get some odd reactions between oversteer and understeer because all that extra load is on the front end. So that is just something to watch out for as you're on track and starting to get yourself acclimated to this absolute tour de force of technology. end of the straight now. Brake as late as you dare, but not too late, because this is a very tight corner. And of course, the exit from it is very important, because you've got another relatively long straight coming up as you pound around the bottom side of the circuit, heading back on your inbound leg. I am braking far too early, I am aware, but having a little bit of trouble seeing where the braking zone is just because of the sunlight. Heading up into the aptly named Porsche curves. These are very fast corners. The car wants to get away from you all the time, and the wall on the right-hand side is right at the edge of the circuit, so you do not want to push the limits too hard there. Driving through here in the middle of the night with glare from your own headlights and perhaps from those of a car behind, got to be absolutely death-defying. Of course, your two chicanes coming back onto start-finish. To qualify on the left, these guys would be maximum attack all the way through here. It is a very long lap here at Les Arts. It's about 8.5 miles, but it actually goes by pretty quickly because you can see you've got a lot of time to sort of collect your thoughts as you're going down the Mulsanne straight. Even though you've got these two chicanes down the middle of the straight, they are pretty well removed from each other, and they're actually not very challenging corners. So just hit your braking zone right and then hit your turn in and apex marks and you're fine. Really not a whole lot of thought involved. But what's just really spectacular about this circuit is that you get 3 distinct points of VMAX. You get it when you first enter Mulsanne on the approach to that first chicane. And then you get it again coming out of this one as you head down the backside of this hill into the very tight, nearly hairpin corner at the end of the straight. And then you get it again out of that hairpin, as we're going to go through in a few seconds here on the approach to Indianapolis. So 3 distinct moments where you get to feel the car's full capability. Absolutely wonderful place to drive a racing car. in terms of what this feels like to drive, it is the absolute synchrony of technology, of power, and of grace. It may look like that I'm having to fight it a little bit through some of these corners, but to be honest with you, I'm overdriving the car a little bit through there because I'm being a little bit conservative and being a little bit cautious because this is an extended review piece, it's a long lap, and I just don't want to make myself look silly to any more extent than I already have, of course. So I am being a little bit cautious. I am trying to be a little bit ahead of the car in terms of where I think it's going to end up, simply because I want to do a decent, respectable review for all of you. So the amount of steering movement that you see through the corners is really not necessary. I'm actually perhaps doing myself a bit of a disservice at the risk of unsettling the balance. But the car is actually very, very smooth to operate. Your inputs are very direct. Like, you can turn in once, and the car goes where you want it to go every time. The front axle is very positive, even though you do get a little bit of understeer from those electric motors regenning as you go into a braking zone and into a turn-in as you're off-throttle. But everything is very stable, it's very predictable, and certainly you want a stable and predictable car when you've got somebody in it for 3 or 4 hours at a time just pounding around this circuit through the night. The brakes feel very, very solid. They're very responsive. Not very easy to lock them up, even when you stand on them heading into the big braking zones. So that is certainly very comforting indeed. You can potentially switch off a little bit when you're driving it. You don't have to be at 10/10ths all the time. It's not a sprint racer like the Ferrari F2002 or Ferrari F2004, for example, where that demands absolute concentration at all times. This, you can relax a little bit. Yes, it is one of the most advanced cars ever built, but at the same time, it's docile. It's understandable. You can deal with its dynamics. One thing that's not so understandable, however, is the amount of technology that they've crammed into it. You've got all of these settings for your motor generator unit and the way that it deploys its electrical energy. Knowing how to monitor and utilize these systems is certainly very, very important during a race, because the way that that power is administered affects the endurance of that power generation and that power administration. You don't want to use it too quickly, especially on a long lap like this, because you'll run out halfway through and all of a sudden your straight line speed goes in the toilet, as does your acceleration. So just wrapping your head around all the different settings for the motor generator unit, how you want that power to be deployed. You need to do a lot of testing. You need seat time in this thing. I still haven't had quite enough to fully understand and explain to you reliably how it works and what setting is the best for what situation. Obviously, hot lap is going to be good for a hot lap, but you wouldn't want to put it in hot lap around a circuit like this, because you'll run out of power probably before the end of Mulsanne, and that's not good, because the rest of this circuit is still very fast, very flowing, and you need as much horsepower as you can get out of the damn thing. So you gotta play with it. You have to be willing to have some patience and spend some time and just learn how the car operates. You'll also notice that the MGU does not dump all of its power on a straight. Yes, it's giving me some boost down the straight, but most of the assist that you get from the electric motors actually comes out of the corners in your acceleration zones. The idea, I guess, is you can be fast down a straight. Straight line speed is very impressive, but the way you increase or decrease your lap time is your speed through and exiting a corner. So if you can accelerate faster than your opposition, get to a reasonable top speed before anybody else, you're actually going to cover more distance more quickly on aggregate in terms of going through sectors of a lap. Straight line speed's very important, but as we often see in racing, the cars that are fastest down the straight are very seldom the fastest over the course of a lap. So straight line speed, although it is very important at a circuit like Le Mans, it is certainly not the least common denominator by any means. Of course, you can hit the manual curves button, and the thing just launches well past 200 miles per hour, bouncing off the rev limiter there at 212. Like we said before, over 400 horsepower on the front axle alone from those electric motors. Absolutely astounding performance envelope. As you can see, because I hit the manual curves button there, we used up pretty much all of our power for this lap, so you want to be very judicious with how you use that overtake button, I'll call it. Certainly not something that you can play with a lot. Because like we've been saying, a long lap at Le Mans, you need as much power as you can get in as many places as you can get it. We are going to dive off into the pits now. Very odd pit entrance here at Le Mans. Pull up to the end of the pit lane here. And because we can't switch it off officially in Assetto Corsa, we will dump it into reverse. And there you have it. The Porsche 919 Hybrid LMP1. Absolutely phenomenal car. It's the centerpiece of Volume 2 of the Porsche Pack DLC, available on Steam for $5.99, I believe. Either $5.99 or $6.99. I can never remember that number for some reason, but certainly do get it, if for no other reason than to have a drive in this car. It's a Le Mans winner. It's an LMP1. It is everything you could ever want in a racing car that's got two doors and a roof. It's just incredible. Absolutely incredible in every possible regard. You want it, go get it. Assetto Corsa on Steam. Go get this car. You will not be sad that you did. Of course, as you're accustomed, I will give you a view of a couple of hot laps without commentary, both onboard and from trackside cameras. You've got to see this thing at work at full pace because it's just glorious. Stay tuned for the hot laps. For RMan601 saying thank you very, very much for watching, and we will see you soon.